Hey, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Empowerment Through Encouragement, where my focus on this podcast is to talk about ADHD and how it relates to each one of us. And even if you don't have ADHD, even if you don't have ADD, even if you don't have any kind of focusing problems or strengths, focusing differently, we all do. So, a lot of times when I'm talking with people, one of the things that I'll say is that, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And the verbiage or the words that we use in our own minds and in our own lives and what we say to ourselves has so much impact on how we relate to other people. Now, when you couple that with the experience of ADD or ADHD, where hyperfocus and hyperactivity, because you have a lot of energy and it hasn't been channeled, and you're just trying to navigate through life and you're trying to navigate through the day, and you can't explain it. And one of the things that I've learned to appreciate as an adult and watching my children as they grew, and now my grandchildren, I noticed that there's a lot of different characteristics. There's a lot of different experiences that took place from my generation, my own experience, and I can reflect back to the way that I remember those things, and I look at the way that my children grew up and their tendencies, and then now I look at my grandchildren. So I kind of get a snapshot of three generations, and even those that don't have the superpower, and I call it a superpower. And the reason I call ADHD a superpower is because we've been given an abundance of energy. And it's when that energy is harnessed and when it's appreciated, not only by the giver, but by the recipient. And when it is appreciated, that's when the world comes together. It creates this full circle of ebb and flow. So I want to share a little story, and I want you to imagine. And like I said, you don't even have to have ADHD to experience. I want you to put yourself in this position, and you can go into your own history, your own uh, journey, and understand the story from your perspective, regardless of whether you have ADHD or ADD or you don't. You're just perfect. And if you're perfect, you'll still relate to this. And I haven't met anybody that's perfect yet. I thought I did, but then I discovered that I wasn't. So perfection is like the lowest standard. And especially this is a tendency for those with ADHD, because they strive for perfection until they discover that it is a fallacy. It is not a real, it's not a real attainable or maintainable experience. So imagine a child in a classroom, overzealous and overactive, and constantly doodling and constantly looking out the window and constantly looking all around, but listening. And a teacher points this out and begins to try to refine that child. But the child continues to fervently do the things that he enjoys doing. He is attracted to something other than the main lesson. And he feels out of place, or she feels out of place. And this constant over and over of reminder that this child is different. Now, there's two things that can happen. A child can either raise up inside themselves, and this has happened, the identity that they are comfortable in their own skin, or, which happens more often than not, is that they begin to feel defective and they notice themselves being different from their classmates. So what happens when we feel different in our environments, in our societies, in our churches, in our gatherings? You go to a meeting and you feel different and you stay back in the corner. You don't voice your ideas because you think that they're so far out of the box. Now, I've talked with leaders, CEOs, that have felt the same I'm going to call it an imposter syndrome. And they led groups in a smaller company. And now they get this transfer. And now they begin to second guess their ability. They think differently. So what happens? What if you told the child, instead of being an obnoxious and learn to behave and learn to sit down, what if you told that child that they were unique in the way that they thought? What if that child could feel that they were unique in a special way, in a super way, not in a defective way, but in a superpower way? What does that do for the child? I'll tell you what it does for adults. I know this from experience, and I can guarantee that it works for children on the same respect. So that's what I want to uncover today. And I want to uncover just a little bit for you. And I don't want this to be exhaustive. I want this to be where you can take these tips and points and apply them into your own life or into those of the lives of those that you recognize that have a superpower. And they've been gifted with an abundance of energy. And it is learning to help them appreciate it. And it can be challenging because, anytime something is different than us, it's a challenge. So the question is, what if we didn't look at ADD or ADHD as a disorder, but as an extraordinary way of thinking? So let's flip the script. ADHD has been labeled as a deficit. And I want to say that it's just a different kind of gift. What if we looked at it as a different kind of gift? People with ADHD tend to excel in creativity, problem solving, and high pressure scenarios because their brains work faster. Now, I know you can't take a race car, a dragster, and put it on the normal highway, but that's kind of what it's like when you have ADHD. So you're taking this race car and you're putting it into an environment where everybody's doing 25 and 35 miles an hour. But if you take a race car and just do 35 miles an hour, it's not going to want to operate the way that it should. It's not going to handle the way that it should. Now, if you take a little car and you put it on the racetrack and you expect it to do 200 miles an hour, you're going to blow the engine up. And so this is what happens, is that we appreciate the race car on the racetrack and we put it into an environment that it succeeds and it achieves, and we put the regular car on the highway. And sometimes people think that they've got a race car, and then they see the symbol of freedom, the red, white, and blue lights, which are not freedom, behind them, and it changes the whole idea. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. But I want you to think about somebody like Richard Branson, who openly shares his ADHD. And, Richard Branson shares a story. It's an amazing story. If you haven't heard it, I want to recommend that you go and research how he shares his inability to do certain things, but he excelled in other things. He thrived by not following the conventional rules. And I say conventional, but by embracing his visionary thinking. Now, if we would empower children, adults of all ages to embrace their unique visionary, their unique way of thinking, what other things could be creative when we think outside of the box? So what I want to give you a practical tip for this scenario, and that is to recognize moments that you're thinking outside the box, that you're not seeing blue as just blue. You're seeing it as hues of blue. One of the things is if you take Crayola, all right, they have a box of 12 crayons, and they have a minimal amount of colors in that 12 box of crayons. Now, Crayola also has a box of 128 colors. And I don't know if there's one that's got more than that, but Now you start to see the variations of blue. You start to see the variations of yellow and red and pink and brown and grays. You start to see the variation because somebody thought outside of the box. So what I want to recommend, what I want to suggest is that you trade in that box of crayons that only has 6 colors in it and go and get the 128. And if you are so inclined, go get a colored pencil box that has 250 or 400 different colors. And now you begin to create things in the way that we see things. You know, if everything was green outside, just one color of green, it would kind of be boring because we wouldn't be able to have that depth of field. Well, ADHD gives us that depth of field. We see things differently and we think outside of the box. So how can you how can somebody with ADHD focus? And this is a big thing. Focus on what matters when everything seems urgent. You see, that's the thing about ADHD is it's not attention deficit, is that our attention goes everywhere. It's like having 50 browsers open all the time. And I'm confessing, I don't have 50 browsers anymore, but there was a time when I would keep all these browsers open because there was some kind of information that I just wanted to come back to. And then I have all these little tabs up there and I didn't want to close it because I thought, you know, I'm going to need that pretty soon. So I'm just going to keep it open. Now that's a true story. That's my story. Now, why did I do that? Once I understood why I did what I did, it helped me to create the little tabs. I didn't know at that time that you could click on the favorite, that little plus button, and it clicks it and it puts it on your favorites. Now, I'm not going to tell you how many favorites I've got, okay? But I know I can bring the association of the picture of that little icon on the side, and I can go right to the information. Like my brain can just switch pages immediately. That's a gift, and I learned how to appreciate that. So it's difficult to be focused on one thing with ADHD. But when you learn that and you discover that, then you're able to corral that. It's like a wild stallion. You can't get on a wild stallion every day, but you know, if you watch the movie Spirit, you know that the stallion gets broken. And what happens is that once you have the ability to appreciate your giftedness, then you understand the old saying that is, if you chase 2 rabbits, you're not going to catch one. So which rabbit do I want to chase? And when we can understand that, and when, you know, you don't know what you don't know when you're in the middle of the battle, but when you step outside of that and you get a 10,000 foot view or a 20,000 foot view, and now you can begin to see, hey, this is the path that I've been taking, and it's all zigzaggedy, and I'm trying to go over here, but I've been going all these different directions. When I learned to prioritize them and I set myself as a timer and not thinking that I'm going to miss something out there, then it gives me the freedom and the flexibility to focus on the one thing or the couple things that matter most, giving myself the ability to do so. So reframing our distractions as cues to what energizes us. I spend hours, and I really spend hours. When I get excited about something, I lose track of time. Like, because I'm watching instruction, I'm watching new techniques, I'm discovering what's going on in the brain, what's going on in the body, and what muscle movement or what muscle engagement actually recruits other parts of the body. And it's the same way with the brain. When I understand that I can come back to it, The problem with ADHD is that I think I've got to drink the whole ocean when I only need a glass, but I don't want to miss anything. And so if you struggle with deadlines, one of the things that you could do is you can set a timer, and you can, I mean, how many of you, raise your hands, go ahead, I'm watching you. All right, thank you. How many of you have gotten wrapped up in watching social media, a binge on Netflix, a series, and you watched one episode or you watched one reel, and then it's like, oh gosh, I got to see the next one, and an hour went by, or 2 hours went by, or if you're a Netflix binge watcher, and I know that there's some of you out there, 3 hours went by because you didn't want to miss the next thing. Now, magnify that for somebody with ADHD. They don't want to miss the next thing. And their mind is constantly going, and there's fragments of this dopamine that comes in. Now, if you tell that child, or if you tell that adult that there's something wrong with them, that they just need to act like an adult, they just need to grow up. Well, maybe they are growing up, but it's different than the way that you anticipated it. Have you ever gone on a vacation and it didn't turn out the way that you wanted? Well, sometimes with ADHD, this is what happens. And so we're looking for that next energy level, and it is thinking outside of the box. So instead of fighting it, what if we incorporated it into like a game like, and included it into the work? You find that when you do that, it actually aligns with your productivity and what you enjoy. So here's a practical tip on that. And I want to put it in 3 tiers. So you might want to write this down or go back and rewatch this. There's the urgent. That's number 1. The urgent is what's most pressing. Then there's the important. It's like, yes, it needs to get done. It's important that it gets done. And then there's the, it's just nice to have. And you can kind of look at it as a street light, traffic light. So green is for now. Let's go for it. That's the urgent. Then yellow is, it's for later. It's important, but it doesn't have to be done right now. And then there's the red. It'd be nice to have, but it can wait. So you can put that into practice and play with that. And as you understand that, is it urgent, important, or would it be just nice to have? And you can, if you can kind of prioritize that simple 3 options, then you can kind of divide your time and have it all. So hyperfocus, the hallmark of ADHD, could it actually become your greatest tool? You see, hyperfocus often gets a bad rap, but what if you viewed it as a superpower? And that's what I'm suggesting. That's what I am promoting, is that look at it as a superpower. When it's directed towards a meaningful goal, hyperfocus can lead to breakthroughs that others only dream of. Now, as I shared, you can get engrossed in certain things, and I do this. I'm going to confess my own stuff, is that I will get wrapped up in watching new training on micro distinctions of the brain and micro distinctions of the body connection. And it's not just information to have information, but it is information that brings, for me, transformation, because I'm able to work with clients and note the little micro steps that are achieving great bounds, and they're missing it. They can't see it. When we can't appreciate the micro step, and when we're when we're hyper focused, we're really narrowing in on that. And that's where creativity comes from. So I often have to set an alarm and say, okay, I'm only going to read for 45 minutes because I can get wrapped up in a book and I can read for 2 hours at a time. Or I can be watching a training video. I got to set a timer. I got to set a timer to remind me where I'm at because I can get lost in the moment. And sometimes the moment lasts for longer than a moment. All right. So identify your zone of genius. That's that area where you naturally lose track of time. What is that area? Is it, you just want to bake? Is it that you just want to color? Is it that you just want to play outside? What are you doing when you're playing outside? What are you doing when you are entranced into a project? Is that your zone of genius that as you learn to appreciate that could actually be the next, let's just say iPhone. It could be the next rocket. It could be the next, the little plastic thing on your shoelaces that we take for granted until that plastic stuff comes off. It could be that. I mean, who thought of that? That is such a genius idea. Excuse me. You've got these tight little holes all along your shoes. And imagine if that little plastic thing wasn't on there. It's kind of a pain. So you go and buy new shoestrings. Well, what could your little, whatever that plastic thing is called on that shoestring be for you? That could be your zone of genius. So what is the cost of inaction? You see, we always talk about what is the return of investment? But I propose to you a question of what is the cost of inaction? What's it going to cost you if you don't respond? What happens if you continue to view ADHD as a limitation instead of a strength? Imagine a brilliant mind being filled with ideas that never come to pass. They say that the richest plot of land was never found in California in the gold mines. The richest plot of land is in a cemetery because there are songs that are unsung. There are ideas that never came to fruition because they didn't think others would accept them. There's books that haven't been written. There's love that hasn't been shared. There's love that hasn't been received. It is the richest place. And if you wait till you get there to discover that, you've waited too long. So what I'm going to propose to you today is that take some of these ideas that you have. Don't miss your potential. Don't miss your opportunity. You see, people that don't express their gift because there's a fear of being misunderstood, that's probably one of the greatest tragedies. And it's going to look different. But if we all look the same, if we all dress the same, if we all talk the same, what a boring place it would be. Now, it would be nice if we could agree a little bit more on certain things that I agree upon. Okay. But what I want to propose is that don't let your song go down with you. Sing it. Okay. A creative professional that I have talked to with ADHD went from one company to another company, went from a smaller company to a larger company, and began to feel that their ideas were just too far out. And they had this imposter syndrome. They started to think that because they thought differently, that's why they were hired. But because they thought so differently, they saw things as this could be the normal. And everybody else thought, no, this isn't how we do things. They began to feel like they really didn't fit in. Now, this happens from kids all the way to retirement. If they would have allowed that to take root, they would have missed opportunities. They would have missed their potential to grow in their career and also inspire others. The other cost of inaction is emotional burnout. If you're constantly fighting your natural tendencies to lead, then it brings frustration and it brings exhaustion. A parent told me that they were exhausted trying to make their ADHD child fit in. I'm from my own personal experience, I know that people tried to make me fit in, and I didn't fit in. And that's what makes me who I am. But once the parent began to embrace the child's unique identity, the unique need that they had, that became the harmonious moment. And it also restored the harmony in the home. It's when we appreciate those with an abundance of energy and learn to channel that, learn to celebrate that. We all see things a little bit different. And when we appreciate that, that's when we can eliminate burnout. That's when we can eliminate imposter syndrome. And, here's the thing with ADHD. It can create relationship strains because misunderstandings can create tension in the personal life and also in the professional life. And we think differently. We think a little more rapidly, and maybe we're missing a couple of the details. Now, I have ADHD. I used to say that I was a perfectionist and I couldn't go on. And this was a fallacy. So I couldn't move forward unless it was exactly the way that it was supposed to be. Good enough is not in my vocabulary. Anybody that knows me, they know that good enough is not in my vocabulary. But there are times when I get so hyper-focused that I will spend a half an hour trying to figure out how to close a paragraph. And it just doesn't sound right when it would be perfectly just fine, just like it is. You see, perfection and having that mindset creates misunderstandings. And when you can't articulate it, or when you're not able to communicate that, and I will say that when you haven't been able to communicate that to other people, it can create this tension that's unnecessary. So here's your call to action. I want you to start with a strength journal. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but where you begin to write down one moment in each day where your ADHD brought value, whether it's a creative idea, a quick problem solving, or out of the box thinking. Just take a day, just do a review of the day and write down, what was it that took place today that was out of the box thinking that made the difference? And I'm going to click over here. I got something in the chat. My friend Charlie says, zone of genius, excellent. And that's the idea. It is our ability. Thank you for that, Charlie. I appreciate that. Our zone of genius is our strength. And when we can appreciate that for what it is, hey, this is how companies start. When I see the backstory of people that have elevated themselves, and I'll bring one person up. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Polish, and he was a drug addict, and I think he was an alcoholic as well. And he went from being a carpet cleaner, just showing up in people's homes, cleaning carpet, to creating the Genius Network. And to be part of the Genius Network, I think it starts at 25,000, and that's the minimal level. And then there's like 100,000. And here's a man who I would probably guess that Joe Polish has ADD or ADHD. I don't know. I'm guessing it because he is a genius. And he just saw the world differently. When we appreciate the way we see the world differently, then we can, as we think outside of the box, we create ideas. I want to say Steve Jobs was somebody who thought outside of the box. Don't let your life be like a Blockbuster video. Blockbuster Video, if you know the story, they got stuck in their own way, really. And what they did was they opened the door for people like Netflix and Redbox, and where you can just go. You don't have to have a subscription. You can binge watch. Well, appreciate your values, thinking outside of the box. Reframe negative narratives. Challenge yourself, okay? Challenge yourself to rewrite one negative thought that you had. Rewrite it. So I'm just so stupid. Change that. Rewind and say, this is how I am smart. It's not how smart are you, but this is how you are smart. And when you begin to appreciate and write these things down, and I mean physically write it down, it makes all the difference. And why does it make the difference? Because as we write, we invite. And as our hand puts pen to paper, not typing, not speaking it into your phone, but actually physically going through the tedious task of writing it down on paper, where the ink comes out or the lead comes out and it doesn't go away. Now it impresses that back into your mind. So what is the thing that you did, that you reframed, that you rewrote, and how can you use that to your advantage? Why does this matter? Because ADHD isn't just a label. It's a lens in which we see many extraordinary individuals experience the world. And it's not about fixing what's wrong, but it's about discovering what's exceptional. You see, I'm so glad that I'm not like everybody else. And there are people that wish that I was more like them. But because I'm not like everybody else, I've been able to have the opportunity to accelerate and to excel. And yeah, sometimes I talk too much. Sometimes I say too many things. Sometimes I bring too much information. But I'm asking for your grace. I'm asking for you to appreciate that. Take what's good, throw out what's not beneficial. But I would have to believe that as we begin to appreciate more about ADD and ADHD and see it as a superpower and see it as exceptional, you see, when you fail to embrace your strengths, there's a ripple effect that takes place beyond just yourself. So don't hold back. Imagine throwing a pebble into the lake and telling the waves to stop. You can't do that. Well, it's the same thing with ADHD. Appreciate the beauty of how far it reaches. So listen, here's why this is now the time to act on some of this. And I'm going to do a part 2 to this because I just believe there's so much that I could bring to you. But I want to carry this over into next week. So this is a pre to the post, obviously, and it's taking these little micro steps, taking these little micro doses and bringing them into your life. You see, the longer you wait to see your ADHD as a strength, the more opportunities slip away. When you start to feel defective, that you can't offer, you can't contribute, that's where life is doing you an injustice, and you're the one that's in control of your life. Nobody else is. So this is your opportunity to innovate and connect and to thrive. The time is now. Start now, today. If you didn't do it yesterday, forget about it. Yesterday is gone. You can't do anything about it. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. So you have today. So begin to write down, what if waiting isn't about being ready, but it's about fear of stepping into your brilliance? What about that? So when you look back at this episode, I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. what resonated with you the most? What was the idea about ADHD that it being a superpower can actually become a specific story? What can you apply based on what I shared with you today in your life right now? What are the simple steps? Could you set a timer? Could you write down one area out of your day of how ADHD really empowered you? And could you reframe something? Could you give it a different meaning? Because nothing has any meaning except the meaning that we give it. Remember, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. So what could you do to start today and create this journal? Now, this isn't the end of the conversation. It is the start of transformation. And this is what I honestly believe. And you know from my YouTube channel that I say that imagination is the only limitation to transformation. Creativity is the seed. Imagination is the seed. Creativity is the fruit. And transformation is the abundance of that. So until we meet again next week, I want you to have, number one, an outstanding day. And I want you to celebrate your superpowers. And that is your ADHD. It's a gift. It's not a curse. Until then, I'm out. Have an outstanding week, and I'll see you next week.